Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
This is Debra, and this is Human Potential at Work. Happy holidays. We are definitely recording this during the holiday season. And I have a real treat for you today. I have a poet on. His name is Dave Steele, and he's joining us from Manchester in the United Kingdom. And I think you're going to be really delighted with him. I've listened to some of his work, and I'm very, very impressed. So my guest today is Dave Steele, and he is a poet, and he just recently had a tour in America, and I sadly missed it, but I'm really, really honored to have him on the show today. So, Dave, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so Dave, tell us a little bit about who you are in this walk.
Okay, I've become to be known as the blind poet, and I'll kind of sort of get to that now. The reason for that is I'm visually impaired. I've got low vision. I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which is a hereditary disease that runs in my family. Obviously, it comes from my mum's side. And about 5 years ago, well, nearly 6 years ago now, I started to dramatically lose my sight to it. So I have a little bit of vision remaining. I can't see out my left eye at all. That's completely blurred. And my right eye is basically like looking through a straw. So I've lost all my peripheral and I've got about 3% of my vision left now.
Yes, and so Dave, were you always a poet?
No, I'd never written a poem until I started losing my sight. I worked as a singer for years. I was a touring act that used to perform at a lot of like cruise ships and hotels. I did a couple of musicals in the UK and a musical in the West End in London, and worked as a singer for the best part of about 20 years. So music and poetry is the same thing to me. And the way it kind of happened was when I was diagnosed, which was in 2014, in April 2014, I went for a routine eye test, eye exam at an optician's because I knew that I had RP in my family, and although I had no effects from it and no sign of it at that age, I used to get myself checked every few years, every couple of years, just to make sure that I was okay and safe to drive and things like that. I walked in for a routine eye test, as I said, nearly 6 years ago, and they looked into the back of my eyes, and immediately they said there's been a dramatic loss. There's a lot of pigment in the back of your eyes on your retinas, and you need to stop driving straight away.
Wow.
So at that stage, it was quite a tender stage in my life. I'd just met my partner, who is now my wife. We were engaged to be married. We just had our son, who was about 6 months old at the time. I was working in the auto trade, selling cars and working as a singer. So everything I did involved me kind of driving myself around. I have a daughter that by previous relationship who lived in Scotland, and every month, a weekend every month, I drive 3.5 hours each way to Glasgow to pick my daughter up and bring her down for the weekend. So when I was told that I had to stop driving straight away, that was a real big impact on my life. And what happened from there onwards was we really struggled for the first year. I was declared legally blind a few weeks later, and my vision started to dramatically go in a very sort of quick sort of downhill slide. We, as a family, because I lost my job through not being able to drive anymore, became under a lot of financial pressure. We lost our house.
Oh.
We struggled to get the support that we needed through the system, through having to wait for I think it was about 8 months for one of the main kind of benefit supports here in the UK. And all the while I was struggling with depression and anxiety from losing my sight, but also the pressure that it was putting under my family. And what happened was, it's a really kind of bizarre story, and still to this day, every time I tell it, I get quite emotional. I was really struggling with depression, and my sister, who also has RP, had advised me to go on to some of the support groups on Facebook to speak to other people that were going through the same things, to try and help me to come to terms with everything that was going on. And through that, I got speaking to some people in my area, and was invited to a support meeting for people with RP, my condition, and a condition called Usher syndrome, which is deaf blindness. And they heard I'd worked as a singer. So before the event, they'd said to me, would you mind being the entertainment for the day? And I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll come and sing for you. And then so the night before the event, I was lying in bed. I was probably at my lowest and really nervous about going to this event. But I wasn't nervous about singing because that's kind of my comfort zone, the sort of performing side of things. And I was in bed with my fiance at the time because we'd not got married yet. And I had this idea where I thought it'd be a great idea to take a song that everyone knows, but to change the words so it would have more of an emotional response, more of an impact when I performed it. So I chose the song "Stand By Me" by Benny King because I like the opening line of "When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is young and light will see," because that was like night blindness to me. I can't see in low light. So within I moved it the following day, and when I did, all these visually impaired people was just like incredible. It gave me something back. They were all saying to me how the words that I had written had made them feel like I was speaking for them, that I was able to describe how they'd always felt about their journey with vision loss or low vision and not being able to find the words themselves. And the way it made me feel was I went through that first year of struggling with all of the things that people go through when they have a diagnosis like that, lack of confidence, anxiety. The biggest thing it took for me was my purpose. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But when I rewrote that song, all of a sudden that was like turning the taps on. I found my pride again. I found like a reason or something that I could do, a purpose to be around. And all of a sudden I just started writing poetry because music and poetry is the same thing to me.
Right. I
And
agree.
yeah, it just started flowing. I was writing. The more we were going through as a family, I was writing every day, sometimes 2 or 3 a day. And it just went on from there, and it just started spilling out for me. And people would say to me that the words that I was writing was helping them come to terms with what they were going through, but then they were also using it as a tool to communicate to their friends and family. And that, being able to have that impact just made me come to terms with what I was going through as well. And it just gave me a purpose. And I just thought, this was going to be a journey that was going to change everything for me. But I never realized, where it would go to. And it's certainly taken off in the last sort of 5 years.
And it's always amazing because I used to think I could predict where my life was going.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally am at an age where I finally have accepted I have no control. And
Yeah.
all I can do is just show up and figure it out. But there's so many pieces to that story to start to unpack. But you're a man, you're engaged, you have a daughter, all of a sudden you can't drive, you've lost your independence, you don't know who you are, what value can you add to the world.
Absolutely.
That's so much to unpack. And it just must, it changes who you are, even though you knew maybe this was coming for you, which also is interesting because
I was
how,
probably in denial about it a little bit.
well, of
A lot
course,
of people are.
right, I would be. So how do you prepare for that? And maybe you do it exactly how you did it.
Well, I mean, this is a question I ask myself quite a lot. One of the things I've not mentioned about RP, which is the hardest part of it for me, is with it being an hereditary disease, there's lots of different variations, lots of different gene mutations of RP. But the type that we have in our family, which I now know since I was diagnosed because I had to go through genetic testing, it's what they call RP1 autosomal dominant. And basically what that means is there's a clear trace within my family, and there's a 1 in 2 chance that my 11-year-old, well, my 12-year-old daughter, she now is, and my 6-year-old son, Austin, can develop it when they're older. Now, with the type that we have, it doesn't normally show the first stages of that till late teens, early 20s, which is just like night blindness. And then in later life, you lose your peripheral, and then you start to lose your central vision. So, that was, and still is the hardest part for me, but it also is the thing that has inspired me to show them that, despite any limitations with, the sight in my eyes, it's not gonna, it's not gonna stop me doing amazing things.
Right, right. And wanting to prepare them for the walk, just like your mom and your
Absolutely.
sister was trying to prepare you, but it is also scary that it happened so suddenly with you, because
Yeah,
maybe you thought you'd get a little bit more of a warning and you'd be able to
absolutely.
walk the path a little slower.
Well, I was always told that it wouldn't affect me until I was like in my 60s. That was what I was told.
Right,
My sister
right.
was the first one to be diagnosed, and that was in the early 80s. And when she was diagnosed in the early 80s, they didn't know a lot about the condition. And they basically just said to her, you've got this thing called RP. There's no treatment or cure. You're probably going to go blind. Oh, and don't have kids. And that was all she was told.
Wow.
It was, and it still is, even to this day, when most people get a diagnosis like that, it's done in a very kind of cold and clinical, you
Yeah.
know, way. And a lot of people fall through the net with that support. So for me, when I had this idea to use music and obviously the poetry to kind of support people like that, it just seemed a really natural way of doing it. I couldn't believe that there wasn't more people doing it. Everyone has a particular song that's got them through maybe a teenage heartbreak or a rough time in life, and I think that's the same with poetry. Is that it's songs, it's lyrics, and it, that impact is just. I mean, the stories that I've got and from people, I get messages all over the world from people through my support page and from the books and things, and I'm never failed to be surprised by the stories that I hear and how far in this day and age where we've got social media, how you can you know spend 20 minutes writing a poem, because I've written over 700 now in 5 years,
Wow.
and
Wow.
yeah, and I mean, it literally does pour out of me, and nothing has ever taken me any longer than 20 minutes to write, because I believe that if it's not coming from the heart, it's not worth writing. So it just generally, I'll get an idea and it just spills onto my phone. I'll do it in my notes on my iPhone, and 20 minutes later I click a button and they send it around the world. And to get those messages from people is just it's amazing. And it's not
It's
just
a gift. It's a gift
yeah.
that you're
Well,
giving to others and to yourself and to your family.
it's funny, I've always had faith, but I never, been like a big churchgoer or anything like that. But I've always believed in something. But you know, you were talking about the things that I've been through in those early stages. I'm a great believer that everything happens for a reason.
I
And there
agree.
were times in my life, in my early days, through not having the right support, where I ended up homeless, and struggled with depression before, and and even the work I did when I worked as a singer, I always thought that I was meant to be a singer from a very early age. All I wanted to do was be a singer, and I did it for like 20 odd years. But now I believe that everything that I did in my past gave me the tools and the armor and the ability to do what I do now, which is help people. And I've made more of an impact around the world doing this in the 5 years that I've been doing it than in 20 odd years of singing and performing, all over the world. It's just a completely different level.
I agree. And I believe that you've just started. And I think
Yeah.
something to give you hope as a father, we do have technology can be a great equalizer. So
Mhm.
driverless cars are
Oh,
going to be
absolutely.
in the future. They're going to be there for you and for your daughter and your son. And I was talking to somebody, I had posted something about driverless cars on LinkedIn, and somebody came back and they said, well, oh, they're dangerous. I don't think we should have driverless cars. 3 people have been killed. And I said, well, did you know that 1 million people a year around the world die in automobile accidents? A
Yeah.
million. And so, and I said, for people with different disabilities, this is a godsend to us. I mean, being
It,
able to be
we are so
independent.
lucky. Yeah, we're
Yes, yes.
so lucky with the technology, the assistive tech that's around. I mean, even just something as simple as my iPhone or a tablet. I'm so reliant on these things now. But there's so many amazing new pieces of technology that are coming out. I know we're going to be talking about America and me being there recently, but I did an event in New York for this new startup firm, and they have a wearable piece of like a wristband that
Okay.
uses what they call haptics technology. So like when your phone vibrates, if it's called, if
Right.
it's ringing, or for different things. So what this does is it basically creates a corridor. If you set somewhere to go on your maps, and it creates a corridor, and if you wander in the wrong direction, it starts to vibrate and sends you back on course. And not only can that be used for something, for people like myself with low vision, but also for like firefighters and things like that.
Right.
The technology out there is just unbelievable. It's we are
I
so
know.
lucky.
We really are. And we need to make sure we continue to embrace and enhance this technology and train this technology, like with the voice technologies, to make sure it gives you and your family options. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, we talk about technology a lot on the program, but
Yeah,
I
well,
just,
actually, I've got to give a shout out to a friend of mine that I believe you know, called Gavin Neat,
oh, I love
from
Gavin.
Scotland. Yeah, Gavin's a very good friend of mine, and yeah, you know, he's another one doing wonderful things. But you know, there's so many, you know, the big firms are paying attention. Apple are really big on it, and you know, I think with an aging population now, I think you have to be. But you know, technology and these devices can make such a massive difference and be a great, as you say, a great equalizer.
I agree. I was talking to Amazon about that, and I was saying, more and more of us are aging into disabilities. And
Hmm.
so, and in the United States, speaking of the US, 1 in 4 Americans, adult Americans, identify as having a disability, according to our CDC. 1 in 4 in the UK, 1 in 5. So, this is not insignificant. And we are using these technologies to be independent because
Yep.
you lost your sight. That doesn't mean you need to lose your life. And it doesn't mean you lose your gifts. And it doesn't mean you're not a good father, a good
No.
provider, and that you want to make sure that your children have options and
But
your
that's the other
nephews
side
and
of it as
nieces.
well. Is
Yeah,
the flip side is it's not so much just the technology as well. The social media, which is a big part of what I do. It's not just about supporting people who have got vision loss. It's also about raising awareness because there needs to be more education with disabilities and particularly invisible disabilities. There's a lot of people. I mean, I don't know how many people you know with visual impairments, but you know, all of us hear that. Oh, you don't look blind.
right.
We get it
I know.
every day,
I know.
and
I
yeah,
have a
and
lot of
it's
friends that are blind and vision impaired, and I have two that I actually was, and they are legally blind, both of them.
mm,
Darren Rowan with Lilly Pharmaceutical, and Dr. Caroline Casey with the Valuable 500, who I adore. And they are both told often they don't look blind. And so it was funny. We were dropping them off at the airport, and they said, okay, let's get out our weight canes so that people will
yeah.
really
So
believe
people
we're
know
blind.
that's it. You've got
And
to kind
people
of play
challenge them
more
on it.
blind. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
amazing.
It's and
Wow.
the problem with it is though, you know, a lot of people will say to me, you know, I speak to people all over the world through my support page, and people will say to me, "Oh, I'm not blind enough to use a cane yet,"
Right.
or "I'm not blind enough to apply for a guide dog yet." And I say to them, "Well, you know, do you find yourself like not going out to certain places, you know, staying in more, becoming a little bit more isolated because of how your vision is?" And they say, "Oh, yeah." And I say, "Well, you're ready then." But
Yeah,
because
you're
they
right.
don't fit into that perceived box of what blindness looks like, they get. I mean, I get it all the time. You know, if I'm traveling somewhere, if I'm going on a train or if I'm flying on an airplane, I'll have assistance at the airport or at the train station to help me on and off boarding through busy platforms and things like that. But then as soon as I sit down, I get my phone out, I'll be on Facebook, I'll be watching a film or whatever, and people will look at me strange going, well, you know, is he at it?
Right. You're posing. Right.
Yeah, is he faking blindness?
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah,
it's a real
we've had some abuse. We've had abuse with guide dogs as service animals, and
yeah,
so
happens
there's
here.
some of that. But the reason why, Dave, I sort of wanted to go down this path a little bit. I really wanted the audience to understand the power of your story, and I also want any corporate brands that are listening to the program to know that you can bring Dave in as a speaker, a consultant, and this is somebody that is really a good representation of the community. And as he says, we need more awareness. We need to understand, once again, what it means to be truly human. So I want to now go to the next part of it, of the show. And I want you to tell us more about your work. I want you to tell us more about when you went to America. And you have already said you would give us one of your poems on air. So I'll let you decide. But I
Sure.
just wanted to sort of tell some of that story because it's so powerful. But at the same time, now I want to spend the rest of our time really showing your talents because you're a very, very talented man with a lot to offer the world. And I want to make sure the audience knows your
Thank you. So,
the
you know,
talents
going
you
back
bring.
into my story, you know, you say everything happens for a reason. So, when the poetry started to flow out of me, I just started posting it online every day. And then a friend of mine in America, suggested that I start my own Facebook page, which I did, which is basically everything's named after that song that started it all, which is Stand By Me RP.
Okay.
So that was the title of the song that I rewrote when I changed the words to Stand By Me. I called the Facebook page Stand By Me RP Awareness Page. After about a year of writing, I had over 100 poems. My supporters and followers through the page said to me, you need to write a book. So I released my first book. They started a GoFundMe page. I released my first book in February 2016, which is February's RP Awareness Month. We've got an awareness month for everything these days, but February's RP Awareness Month. So I released the first book in February 2016, Stand By Me RP, and that became the #1 European poetry release in both America and Australia in its first week. A year later, I released Stand By Me RP Volume 2, which became the #1 European poetry release in America and Australia on its first day. And then Volume 3 came out in February 2018, and that did it as well. So it just kind of kicked off from there. The Facebook page now is one of the largest RP support groups in the world. And that's pretty much what I dedicate my time to, is supporting people, writing poetry and speaking at events here and now obviously in America. So through an organization, a company called the Low Vision Specialists of Maryland and Virginia, who were my tour sponsors, they brought me out to America at the end of October it was 18 days it was, on the East Coast. And we did events, you know, in New York, in Washington, in Baltimore, in Rhode Island, in Boston, and I was speaking for different charities and organizations, and the impact and the response from people was just completely overwhelming. I always get that kind of response here, you know, with it being poetry. You have a lot of people who aren't affected by low vision or a visual impairment who will, when I'm speaking the words, will close their eyes and put themselves in my place, and you get a very emotional response from them. But then for the other people who have lived these things for years, when they hear me speaking their thoughts, which is, you know, the response that I get, it's overwhelming. I did my first event in a place called Lancaster in Pennsylvania for an organization there who run a lot of support groups, and called Vision Corps. And it was quite an elderly audience, and at the end we had men and women coming up to me in tears, wanting to hug me. I did an event for an organisation. Well, it was a Veterans Day concert, and it was all like Marines and the Navy and everything else for Veterans Weekend. And I got asked to go and read a poem, which I'm going to read for you soon, at this event, and I got a standing ovation from 500 veterans on Veterans Weekend. It was crazy. I'll tell you this quick story. One of the most goosebumps moments of the full tour, there was two actually, but one was, I was at Rhode Island College, and I'd been invited there to do 2 sessions, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, by a family who live local, who have a daughter called Michaela, who has Usher syndrome. She's 9 years old, deafblind, and she's been helped greatly by my poetry. She uses it to kind of come to terms with what she's going through on a daily basis. Mum reads her the poems, and you know, I've kind of been a support for the family, and I keep in touch with them and speak to them, you know, quite regular. So when they heard I was coming to America, they organised this event at Rhode Island College. So on the afternoon event, I'd done a 45-minute hour presentation, did a Q&A, and then was doing some book signings. And while I was doing the book signings, I noticed there was a guy in the room, late 20s, early 30s, who looked kind of out of place. He was wearing like a high-vis jacket, looked kind of nervous, was trying to catch my attention, and there was just something about him that was drawing myself to him. So eventually he comes up to me while I'm doing this book signings and introduces himself, and I said, hey, you know, what brings you here today? And he said to me, he said, oh, well, I was just diagnosed with RP on Monday.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, wow. And this was Wednesday. So as soon as he said that, I said to him, look, just come over here a second. And I took him to a table out the way of people, and I sat him down and I said, look, you know, really sorry to hear that. I said, how you feeling? I said, you know, I totally remember, you know, how it feels and, you know, what happened. And he's just basically said, well, he said, I thought I had cataracts, and I went in for an eye test, and they looked in the back of my eyes, and he said, no, it's this thing called RP, and there's no treatment or cure, and you might go blind. And, oh, do you have children? He said, oh, I've got 3 children. They might have it. And, you know, and it all kind of went on from there. And he said, you know, I've been through every emotion, angry and tears, you know, sad, going for over a couple of days. And I went online researching RP, and I found one of your poems. And he said, it just spoke to me. It struck a chord with me. And he said, I was in work today and my wife called me at work and she said, you're never going to believe this, but Dave Steele is in America. And not only is he in America, he's in Rhode Island. And this guy jumped in his car and drove straight to me from work.
Oh,
And I
that's
was like,
incredible. That's an incredible, and talk about a connection.
yeah,
That
I
right
was
there
like,
proves that you're making, and of course you are making a huge difference. But sometimes life is tough, and sometimes it helps having somebody just to hold your hand as you're walking these paths.
well, the thing is with poetry as well is when they're reading it from the books, is they internalize it because they're reading it in their own voice. This is why people say to me, "Oh, it's like you're speaking for me." When they're reading it themselves, they're hearing their voice and hearing their voice say these words and encouraging themselves that it won't stop them and they can do these things and not to listen to the people with the misconceptions about looking blind is a certain way or you have to be a certain way to use a cane. When they hear all these things, it encourages them in a way that hearing it in other formats won't do, and it makes a massive change to people. There's the other story I was quickly just going to tell you was when I was in Baltimore, there was a family that traveled all the way from Amarillo in Texas, who
Wow.
brought a little girl called Jackie Wilson, who when she was 6 years old started to lose her sight dramatically to RP, and she was being bullied at school, and she used some of the lines in my poems to come back at these bullies.
Wow.
So after I heard about this, her mum reached out to me. She was going through a really rough time. I wrote a poem for her, called it Jackie Wilson, and I put it in my second book without telling her, sent her the first copy, and then called her on the day she received it. And she went skipping into school, going, I'm in a book, and she was really excited.
Oh,
And she's 9 now. In fact, sorry, she's 10 now, Jackie. And she traveled all the way from Amarillo to come and meet me when I was the keynote speaker for the National Federation for the Blind at their annual conference in Baltimore while I was on tour. And we
that's
got
so
to
cool.
meet for the first time. It was amazing. Got to sit her on my knee. She's 10 now, and I sat her and read her poem for her. And
Oh,
it's
that's
just, being able
beautiful.
to do that for people, it's just amazing.
And I'll also say for any of my listeners that don't know, Texas and Maryland, that's a really long way away from each
Yeah,
other. That is
they've
not
never left the
a
state.
drive. You have
No,
to, yeah, it's a many, many day drive. It's a really big difference. So, but yeah, good for you, Dave. You are changing lives. So, we
I
would
think when
love, yeah, go ahead.
no, sorry, I was just going to say, I think when anyone goes through any kind of life changing event, I speak to a lot of people, and it kind of makes you focus on what's important in life. You see life in a different way. You appreciate the little things, and especially with vision loss. Because I've only got a very small window of vision, I look at the day in a different way. And my wife says it's made me a better husband, maybe a better father, because I appreciate what's important in life. And I think that's been the biggest thing for me. That's what I've learned through this poetry is that it's really, really simple to help people this way. And, I love having an impact.
I know, and you're having a major impact. So, we would definitely like you to perform a poem.
Absolutely. I'll read a poem for you that just basically tells my story and tells you why I do what I do and what I do it for. And it goes like this. All the tears that I have shed and these scars upon my wrist have made me who I am today, prepared me now for this. I wouldn't be so strong if I had never failed before. I'd still be isolated, scared to step outside my door. I'm not saying that I'm over this. Those bad days still come. For even now, whilst reading this, I'm blinded by the sun. I'm anxious and my chest is tight. I feel like giving in. But deep inside my heart, I know I'll never let this win. I promised just 5 years ago when blindness certified, through poetry I'd share my tale to others far and wide. So no one ever need to feel alone with losing sight, explain their thoughts to loved ones through these verses that I write. But never did I imagine that my words could do so much. They've healed the hearts of strangers, opened doors with slightest touch. I'll be a friend my pride will mend, my purpose clear to see. 3 books will be my legacy, my stand by me RP. I know that soon these faces that I look upon today will disappear, but I won't fear. These memories will stay. My wife, my sons, my daughter, in here will never age. My love for them is printed in each poem, verse, and page. When last is gone, I'll carry on to make my family proud, to be a voice for others, to help them lift this hazy shroud, inspire them to grab a cane and step outside their home. 4 words, each poem's message, saying you are not alone.
Oh, so powerful, Dave. And he has three books, and he does tours, and he, support so many others. So I love how you have really found who you are and how you can serve humanity, Dave. It's just
Yeah,
really beautiful.
thank you. I mean, the new series of books I'm doing a new children's series of books that are going to be published next year, which is based on my son. It's about a visually impaired boy and his guide dog and all the challenges that they face. It's about helping kids with disabilities in schools have a character to identify with and for them to integrate better. And it's all short poetry stories, all short poems, which are stories for young kids. And I'm hoping that's going to help a lot of children as well. So yeah, big things to come next year.
Yes. And so tell the audience how to find your work. I know you have mentioned it before, but let's mention again. Let's talk about your website. Let's talk about, and you have once again done this, but I just want to make sure we do it.
No, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got a new website launching where all the details are going to be on at the beginning of January, which is going to be theblindpoet.net. That's theblindpoet.net. Also on Facebook, you can get me on Stand By Me RP awareness page, and the books are available on Amazon, which is Stand By Me RP Volume 1, 2, and 3.
Excellent. And we will make sure that we provide those links as well. And I'm going to continue to follow Dave's career, and you hear the beauty in his words, in his voice, and he has this powerful journey that he's sharing and that is ongoing. And I think that we all can. I know that the world's a better place because you're in it and you're helping yourself, your family, and others, Dave. And I just think that's very, very powerful. That's one reason why I was really glad when y'all reached out to me to be on the show.
Yeah, well, so next year, it's funny that 2020, is a very apt year for something big to happen. And I think I'm going to be back in America lots next year. There's a lot of big plans for me coming out for different events and things with a lot of the major charities out there. And I hope to basically reach a lot more people. It's just trying to get a bigger audience. I've seen the impact that these words have had already on the people that I've spoke about, in this interview. And I just want to replicate that with more people. There's a lot of people I'm yet to reach who are very isolated due to, losing vision. And it's a waste of a life to stay indoors because of misconceptions and not getting the right support out there. So if I can help with my words, then all the better.
And it's great that you're speaking for nonprofits and, but also corporations like to bring in guest speakers, and they really
Absolutely.
like to bring in a speaker that can, talk about your journey and that are helping others. And so I think you would be a great corporate spokesperson. So I, put that out there for you too.
That's the plan. But it changes my life as well. As I said, when I was first diagnosed, when we lost everything, I didn't know what I was going to do next. So, it helps me helping other people. That's what it's all about, isn't it? And I want to be able to create the opportunities for my family to see me do more.
Well, we're very, very impressed with your work, and I will make sure we'll provide all the links. But Dave, thank you so much for being on our holiday episode. I love your voice. I love your words. I love the story. I love how you're empowering others. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye everyone.